Costco is supposed to save you money, but what if some of their most popular foods are actually doing the opposite? What if the deals you trust the most are quietly costing you more, pushing you to overeat, and making you buy far more than you ever planned? Today, we're breaking down the Costco foods you should never buy, and what to get instead if you actually want to win the system. Number 1. Rotisserie chicken, the loss leader trap. Let's start with the item almost everyone comes in for. The $4.99 rotisserie chicken. It feels like the ultimate deal, hot, ready to eat, and cheaper than almost anything else you can buy, which is exactly why it works so well. Because that price isn't designed to make Costco money, it's designed to get you in the door and lower your guard, setting the tone for everything else you're about to buy. This is what's known as a loss leader, a product intentionally priced low to create the perception of value. And once that perception is locked in, it becomes much easier to justify the rest of your cart, even if those items aren't actually saving you money. Because most people don't walk in, grab the chicken, and leave. They start browsing, adding snacks, drinks, bulk items, things they didn't plan to buy. And suddenly, that $5 purchase turns into a much bigger receipt. But there's also a quality trade-off most people don't think about. These chickens are typically injected with a sodium solution to keep them juicy and consistent, which boosts flavor but also increases the overall sodium content compared to cooking one yourself. And while it might not seem like a big deal occasionally, it adds up if it becomes a regular habit. And over time, the convenience starts to shape your routine. You rely on it more, cook less, and build your shopping around what's easiest instead of what gives you the most control. So while the chicken itself isn't necessarily the problem, the role it plays is. It's the anchor that makes everything else feel like a good deal. A smarter move is buying raw chicken in bulk, cooking it yourself, and portioning it out, which gives you better control over cost, ingredients, and how much you actually use. Because once you understand how one low-priced item can influence your entire trip, you start to see the store very differently. And the next item might look like a simple breakfast, but it's one of the easiest ways to overload your day before it even begins. Number 2. Muffins, the healthy bakery illusion. Now, as you move past the front of the store, the bakery pulls you in almost instantly. And those oversized muffins look like a comforting, homemade breakfast that feels like a great value. But in reality, they're much closer to dessert than anything you'd want to start your day with. Each muffin can pack hundreds of calories and a surprising amount of sugar, often comparable to cake. But because it's labeled and positioned as a breakfast item, it feels easier to justify, especially when you tell yourself it's just a quick, convenient option. The problem gets worse when you factor in how they're sold. You're not buying one, you're buying multiple packs, which means you now have a large supply sitting at home. And when food is readily available and already paid for, you're far more likely to eat it regularly, whether you plan to or not. There's also a subtle labeling trick that makes it seem less extreme. Some of these muffins list nutrition as if 1 equals 2 servings, but most people eat the whole thing, which means you're consuming double what's shown without thinking about it. So what starts as a simple breakfast turns into a high-calorie habit that can throw off the rest of your day, especially when paired with coffee or other add-ons. A better approach is choosing something that actually supports your energy, like Greek yogurt with fruit or a protein-based breakfast that keeps you full without the sugar spike. Because once something like this becomes routine, it quietly resets your expectations of what a normal breakfast should look like. And the next category might seem like one of the healthiest options in the store, but once you look past the branding, it tells a very different story. Number 3. Protein bars, the health halo scam. This is where the marketing becomes even more convincing, because now you're looking at products designed to feel like a smart, health-focused choice. Something quick, high in protein, and easy to justify. But once you look past the front of the package, the reality is much less impressive. Many of these bars, including popular options like Kirkland Signature, RX Bar, and Quest Nutrition, rely on processed protein sources, syrups, and additives to hold everything together and keep them shelf-stable. And while they may deliver protein, they often come with ingredients that don't provide the same level of quality as whole foods. To keep sugar numbers low, many use sugar alcohols or artificial sweeteners, which can cause digestive discomfort and leave you feeling unsatisfied, creating that cycle where you eat one but still feel like you need something else. The bigger issue is how they change your habits. Because they're sold in bulk, you always have them on hand, which makes it easy to rely on them instead of real meals or more balanced options. And over time, something meant to be occasional becomes part of your daily routine. From a cost standpoint, they're often more expensive per serving than simple whole foods that provide similar or better nutrition. But the convenience and branding make them feel like a better choice than they actually are. A smarter move is focusing on real, minimally processed options like eggs, yogurt, or other simple protein sources that give you the same benefit without the extra additives. Because once you stop letting the label decide for you, it becomes much easier to see what's actually worth buying. And the next item might look like the healthiest thing in your cart, something fresh and loaded with vegetables, but it comes with a hidden layer most people never think about. Number 4. Pre-made salads, the convenience trap. This is where things seem like an obvious win, because now you're choosing something fresh, colorful, and loaded with vegetables, which makes it feel like one of the healthiest decisions you can make in the store. But once you look at everything that comes with it, the picture changes pretty quickly. These salads aren't just greens. They come as complete kits with dressings, toppings, and add-ons that dramatically increase the calorie count. And in many cases, that dressing alone can turn a light meal into something much heavier than expected. Most people use the entire packet without thinking about it because it's pre-portioned and designed that way. And once it's mixed in, there's no real sense of how much you've added, even though it can double the impact of the meal. There's also the issue of shelf life. Because these are sold in larger quantities, you're working against time to finish them before they spoil. And if you don't keep up, part of what you bought ends up going to waste, which cancels out the value you thought you were getting. So while it looks like a healthy, convenient option, you're often paying more, losing control over ingredients, and still risking waste if you don't use it quickly. A better approach is buying the base ingredients separately, using bulk greens, and adding your own toppings and dressing, which gives you full control over both quality and portion size. Because once you stop relying on pre-built meals, you start making choices that actually match what you need. And the next category might feel like the ultimate solution for saving time, but it comes with a trade-off most people don't fully consider. Number 5. Frozen processed meals, the time saver illusion. This is where convenience takes over, because frozen meals promise to solve one of the biggest problems most people face, which is time, and having something ready in minutes feels like an easy win. But once you look at what you're actually getting, the trade-off becomes harder to ignore. Most of these meals are built for long shelf life, which means they rely on high levels of sodium, preservatives, and processed ingredients to maintain flavor and texture. And while that makes them consistent and easy to prepare, it also means you're often consuming far more sodium than you would in a freshly made meal. The ingredient quality also tends to be lower. To keep costs down while offering large quantities, many of these meals use refined carbs, processed meats, and heavy sauces that are designed for taste, not balance, which can leave you less satisfied and more likely to eat again later. There's also a misconception that these are saving you money. When you break down the cost per serving and compare it to simple meals you could prepare yourself using bulk ingredients, the difference isn't always in your favor, especially when you factor in quality and portion size. And because you're buying in bulk, you're committing to eating these meals repeatedly, which reinforces the habit of choosing convenience over control. A better approach is using Costco for basic ingredients like frozen vegetables, rice, and raw proteins, then preparing your own meals in batches so you still get convenience without sacrificing quality. Because convenience isn't always the problem, it's what you give up to get it. And the next category takes that same idea and turns it into something even more subtle, where the size of what you buy starts to influence how much you eat. Number 6. Bulk snacks, the overeating engine. This is where Costco's model works exactly as intended, because the moment you step into the snack section, everything is built around one idea: more for less, larger bags, bigger boxes, and multi-packs that make it feel like you're getting a better deal just by buying more. But what often gets overlooked is how that more directly affects how much you actually consume. When food is available in large quantities, you tend to eat more of it without realizing it. There's no natural stopping point. You open a bag, grab a handful, then another. And because it feels like there's plenty left, it doesn't trigger the same awareness you'd have with smaller portions. So what seems like a few bites quickly adds up. This applies to everything in that aisle: chips, crackers, granola bars, trail mix, anything that's easy to snack on and high in calories, because those foods are designed to be eaten casually. And when they're always within reach, they become part of your routine. The psychology behind it is simple. Once you've paid for it and have a large supply at home, it feels easier to justify eating it more often. And over time, that turns occasional snacking into a daily habit without much thought. From a cost perspective, this is where the value starts to break down. Even if the price per unit is lower, the total amount you consume often increases enough to cancel out those savings, meaning you're not just eating more, you're also spending more over time. A better approach is creating limits around what you buy and how you portion it, choosing smaller quantities, or dividing bulk items into controlled servings so there's a clear stopping point. Because once you realize that the size of what you buy influences how much you eat, bulk stops being a guaranteed advantage. And the next category builds on that same idea, but adds another layer, where the label itself changes how you think about what you're eating. Number 7. Organic junk food, the organic trap. This is where perception starts to override reality, because now you're looking at products that feel like a healthier choice simply because of how they're labeled, with words like organic and natural, creating the impression that what you're buying is better for you, even when the actual product hasn't changed in any meaningful way. At the end of the day, organic junk food is still junk food. An organic cookie still contains sugar, an organic chip is still fried, and an organic snack can still be just as calorie-dense as the regular version. But that label creates a sense of trust that lowers your guard and makes it easier to justify eating more. This is what's often called a health halo. Because something appears healthier, you unconsciously give yourself permission to consume more of it, especially when it's already sitting in your home in large quantities. And that's where the bulk factor makes it even more effective. You're not just buying one item, you're buying a supply. And when that supply feels like a better option, it becomes part of your routine without the same level of awareness. There's also the cost side to consider. Organic versions of snacks usually come at a higher price, so you're often paying more for something that doesn't actually deliver more value if your goal is to improve your overall diet. A better approach is focusing on the type of food rather than the label, choosing whole, minimally processed options that actually support your nutrition, whether they're organic or not. Because once you stop relying on marketing to guide your decisions, it becomes much easier to see what's actually worth buying. And the next category brings the focus back to value, because even when something seems like a simple way to save money, the outcome depends entirely on what happens after you bring it home. Number 8. Milk and dairy in bulk, the spoilage problem. This is where saving money depends on what actually gets used, because dairy feels like an easy win, something you already buy regularly. So getting a larger quantity at a lower price seems like the smart move. But the problem is how quickly that value disappears if you don't use it in time. Dairy has a limited shelf life. Once it's opened, the clock starts working against you, and when you're buying more than you normally consume, it becomes difficult to keep up before it expires. especially for smaller households where usage doesn't match the size of the product. What usually happens is simple. You use it normally at first, but as time passes, there's always some left that doesn't get finished. And once that portion goes bad or gets thrown out, the savings you thought you had are gone. Because the real cost isn't based on what you bought, it's based on what you actually used. There's also a subtle behavior shift that comes with it. Having more on hand can lead to using it more often just to avoid waste, which means you're consuming more than you planned, not because you needed it, but because it's there. A better approach is matching the quantity to your actual habits, buying smaller amounts, choosing longer-lasting options when possible, or freezing portions so nothing goes to waste. Because once you focus on usage instead of price per unit, you start making decisions that actually save you money. And the next category is even easier to overlook because it's something you only use a little at a time, but over time, it can add up in ways most people never notice. Number 9. Condiments and sauces, the hidden sugar bombs. This is where things become easy to ignore, because condiments don't feel like a major part of your diet. They're just something you add to other foods, a little here and there, which makes them seem harmless. But over time, those small additions can add up much more than most people realize. Many common sauces are built around sugar. Ketchup, barbecue sauce, dressings, and marinades are designed to enhance flavor, and that often means added sugars and refined ingredients that make food more appealing, but also increase your overall intake without you noticing. The bulk size changes how often you use them. When you have a large bottle sitting in your fridge, it becomes something you reach for automatically, adding a little more each time. And because it's spread across so many meals, it never feels like a significant amount, even though it adds up over weeks and months. That's where the impact becomes clear. Those small servings can translate into a steady stream of extra calories and sugar that you're not accounting for, simply because they don't feel like a main part of your meal. There's also the value issue. Even though these products last longer than fresh foods, they still have a shelf life. And if you don't finish them, part of what you paid for goes unused, which changes the overall cost. A better approach is being more selective with what you buy and how much you use, choosing smaller quantities, looking for simpler ingredient options, or using alternatives that don't rely heavily on added sugar. Because once you start paying attention to the small things, you begin to see how much they actually contribute. And the final category ties everything together, combining freshness, bulk buying, and perception into one of the most convincing traps in the entire store. Number 10. Bakery items, the freshness illusion. This is where everything comes full circle, because the bakery is designed to feel like the highest quality section in the store, with fresh bread, pastries, and desserts that look like they were just made, creating a sense of value that's hard to question. But that same freshness is exactly what creates the problem in a bulk setting. Most of these items don't last very long. Without preservatives, they begin to lose quality quickly, and when you're buying large quantities, it becomes difficult to finish everything before it goes stale or needs to be thrown out, which means part of what you paid for never gets used. That leads to two outcomes. You either eat more than you planned just to avoid waste, or you end up throwing some of it away, and in both cases, the value you thought you were getting starts to disappear. There's also the nutrition side. Even though these items feel fresh and homemade, they're still built around refined flour, sugar, and high-calorie ingredients that are easy to overeat, especially when they're sitting out and ready to grab at any time. And because they're not portioned individually, there's no clear stopping point, which makes it easier to keep going without realizing how much you've had. A better approach is controlling the quantity, either by buying smaller portions elsewhere or freezing what you won't use right away so it doesn't go to waste. Because freshness alone doesn't determine value, how much you actually use does. How to beat Costco's system. When you step back and look at all of this together, a pattern becomes clear, because none of these foods are necessarily the problem on their own. It's how they're packaged, priced, and presented that changes how you interact with them. Costco is built around volume, convenience, and perception. And when those three things come together, it becomes easy to buy more than you need, eat more than you planned, and feel like you're saving money even when you're not. So the goal isn't to avoid Costco, it's to use it differently. Going in with a plan, focusing on simple, whole foods, and buying based on what you'll actually use instead of what looks like the best deal helps you stay in control. Because saving money isn't about buying more, it's about wasting less. And once you start thinking that way, the entire store works differently. Costco can absolutely save you money, but only if you know what not to buy. If you want more videos breaking down the foods that are quietly costing you your health and your wallet, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.